Imagine this. You open your eyes, and the first thing you feel is cold. Not normal cold, a cold that bites into your bones. You try to move, but your arms and legs don't respond. Leather straps dig into your skin. Somewhere in the darkness, a pencil scratches on a clipboard. You are not a patient. You are not being treated. You are a test subject. Outside the door hangs a sign with one word: experiment. Tonight's video is about the darkest side of war, where doctors stopped healing and started killing in the name of science. This is the story of war crimes and human experiments, and how ordinary people turned hospitals and labs into torture chambers, while telling themselves they were doing it for the greater good. War doesn't just destroy cities, it destroys boundaries. In peacetime, we have rules. Doctors swear oaths, scientists follow ethics, soldiers follow laws. But in total war, those rules start to feel optional. Leaders whisper, "We are fighting for survival." Normal morals don't apply. Anything is justified as long as we win. And that's where it begins. Not with monsters, but with human beings, who convince themselves that other people aren't really human anymore. Prisoners of war become material. Civilians become samples. Entire populations become problems to be studied. Once you accept that idea, the door to human experimentation quietly opens. And behind that door, the worst of human history is waiting. Picture a hospital. White coats, metal instruments, clean rooms. Now remove one thing: ethics. On paper, some of the worst war criminals in history had impressive titles: Professor of Medicine, Chief Surgeon, Research Director. They didn't see themselves as murderers. They saw themselves as pioneers. They believed, if we can test new drugs on prisoners, we might save our soldiers. If we push the human body to its limits, we'll understand survival better. If we study disease in captive groups, we can weaponize or control it. Sounds science. But there's one problem. Their patients never consented. They were forced. They were lied to. They were treated as objects, not people. Some were prisoners of war. Some were political prisoners. Some were civilians pulled from their homes, accused of being enemies of the state. They were tied down, injected, exposed, infected, not to cure them, but to see how long they could suffer before they died. All of it carefully recorded in notebooks and reports. In their minds, the doctors weren't doing evil, they were making progress. That's the terrifying part. Let's go back to the cold. Imagine being led into a room with a tub of ice water. You're told to undress. You ask why. No one answers. Hands push you down. Water closes over your body. Every instinct screams to get out. You try to stand, but they hold you down. Your teeth start to chatter. Your fingers go numb. This wasn't a nightmare. This was a category of experiments done in war, to see how long a human could survive in freezing conditions, to test rescue techniques for pilots shot down into icy seas, to measure the exact moment when the body begins to fail. A stopwatch ticking. A researcher writing down numbers as your body temperature drops. Heart rate falling. Breathing shallow. Subject unresponsive. On the report, you're not a person. You're a data point. Now imagine the mindset required to do that every day, and still go home at night and eat dinner with your family. That's what war did to some people. Not all experiments used ice. Some used invisible weapons. In secret facilities, far away from the front lines, scientists explored how to spread deadly diseases through water or air, how poisons affected the body at different doses, how long people could survive after being exposed to toxic substances. Prisoners were deliberately infected with illnesses, denied treatment to observe the natural course of disease, exposed to gas or chemicals in chambers while doctors watched from a safe distance. Again, all of it written down as result: time until symptoms appear, pain level reported, time of death. Some experiments tried new surgeries. Limbs were operated on without proper anesthesia. Organs were removed or damaged just to see what would happen. If this sounds cold and mechanical, that's exactly what it became. Once the victims are no longer seen as humans, cruelty doesn't feel like cruelty. It feels like research. That's the horror. After the war, when the world finally saw what happened inside these laboratories, the reaction was shock. Doctors, surgeons, scientists sat in courtrooms and heard their own reports read back to them. They tried to defend themselves. We were following orders. Our country demanded it. We believed the experiments would save lives. They used the language of medicine, subjects, trials, procedures. But behind those neutral words were real people, real names, real families, real screams. The world had to answer a hard question. What do you do with a doctor who used their skills not to save lives, but to destroy them? For some, the answer was prison. For others, execution. But even that wasn't the end of the story. Some data from these experiments, as horrifying as its origin was, contained information. Information that later researchers debated. Should it ever be used? Or should it be locked away forever? There is no easy answer. Because in every page of that data, there is a victim who never chose to be there. For a long time, many survivors didn't talk. How do you explain something like that? How do you describe waking up on a table, not knowing what's been done to your body? How do you describe being treated like a lab rat by someone who calls himself a doctor? Some victims stayed silent from shame, some from trauma, some because no one wanted to listen, but slowly testimonies began to emerge, in courtrooms, in documentaries, in interviews recorded for future generations. They spoke about being lied to about procedures, being told it was for their own good, seeing fellow prisoners taken away and never coming back. Their voices did something important. They transformed experiments back into what they really were, crimes, not accidents, not mistakes in judgment, crimes. And those testimonies changed international law forever. Out of this darkness, new rules were born. Nations realized something terrifying. If you put war, fear, and ideology together, you can turn hospitals into torture facilities and doctors into executioners. So, after the war, the world tried to create safeguards. Clear medical ethics codes, requirements for informed consent, international laws that say you cannot experiment on humans without their voluntary agreement. Ever. Those laws weren't written in ink, they were written in blood of prisoners who died tied to tables, in the blood of people left with permanent injuries and scars, in the blood of those who never got to tell their stories. And even today, those laws are tested, because every time a government says national security is more important than requirements for informed consent, international laws that say you cannot experiment on humans without their voluntary agreement. Ever. Those laws weren't written in ink, they were written in blood of prisoners who died tied to tables, in the blood of people left with permanent injuries and scars, in the blood of those who never got to tell their stories. And even today, those laws are tested, because every time a government says national security is more important than human rights, the shadow of those old laboratories appears again. You might be thinking, I could never do something like that. I would never hurt innocent people in the name of science or orders. Most of us believe that, but the doctors and soldiers who took part in these experiments didn't wake up one day and say, I want to become a war criminal. They arrived there step by step. Dehumanization, hearing over and over that certain people are less than. Normalization, rationalization. If we don't do this, our country will lose. Sacrificing a few will save many. By the time the line is clearly, undeniably crossed, it's already far behind them. That's why studying war crimes and human experiments isn't just about the past. It's a warning for the present. So why talk about this? Why drag these horrors back into the light? Because every generation faces the same temptations, to treat some people as less important, to excuse cruelty because the situation is special, to believe that the ends justify the means. Today, it might be different words: national emergency, security threat, scientific breakthrough. But the pattern is the same. The moment we accept that some lives are expendable, we quietly reopen the door that led to those war laboratories. And the most dangerous sentence in history becomes, "It's okay, it's for the greater good." A man in a white coat writing numbers on a clipboard. A soldier holding a stopwatch while someone screams behind glass. A victim strapped to a table, nameless in a report, but real in every other way. This is what happens when science loses its soul, when medicine loses its mercy, when war eats away at our ability to see each other as human. War Crimes and Human Experiments is not just a title, it's a reminder that knowledge without ethics becomes a weapon, that obedience without conscience becomes complicity, and that doctors, scientists, and soldiers have a choice every single day to treat people as objects or as human beings. If there's one lesson written in the ruins of those secret labs, it's this: never trust anyone who tells you that some lives are less valuable than others. That is where the worst crimes in history always begin. If you're still here, you're the kind of person who doesn't look away from the dark parts of history, because you understand something important. We don't study this to enjoy the horror, we study it to prevent it from happening again. If you want more deep dives into the psychology of power, war, and the darkest corners of human history, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments which hidden wartime story should we uncover next. Because history doesn't just live in textbooks, it lives in choices. And the more we understand those choices, the harder it becomes to repeat them.